Do you ever feel like your mind refuses to rest? Thoughts circling endlessly, replaying conversations, predicting disasters, analyzing every tiny detail until your body feels tight, your breath shallow, and your spirit heavy. You tell yourself it's just overthinking, but what if it's something deeper? Carl Jung believed that when the shadow is ignored, it does not disappear, it whispers, it nags, it turns into a restless voice that never stops speaking inside of you. That inner critic you hear, the one that scolds you, questions you, warns you at every turn. It might not simply be you. It might be the shadow, demanding to be seen. Here's the paradox. The more you try to silence your thoughts, the louder they become. The more you resist the inner critic, the stronger it grows. But shadow work offers another path. Instead of fighting, you turn toward the very voice that haunts you. You listen. You reflect. You discover what has been buried beneath years of judgment, shame, and expectation. Imagine this. What if the overthinking that exhausts you could become a doorway to peace? What if the voice of your critic could transform into the guidance of an ally? In this journey, we are not chasing quick fixes. We are stepping into Jung's world of depth psychology, where the restless mind is not an enemy but a mirror, reflecting what the conscious self refuses to admit. If you have ever wondered why your thoughts feel heavier than anyone else's, you are in the right place. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will see that shadow work may hold the very key to calming your overthinking mind and finally silencing the critic within. Shadow work, a phrase that sounds mysterious, even intimidating. But at its core, it is simply the practice of looking at the parts of yourself you usually avoid: the hidden emotions, the suppressed desires, the rejected pieces of your personality that you've tucked away in the dark. Carl Jung called this the shadow, and he insisted, "What we do not make conscious will rule our lives as fate." For overthinkers, this truth is especially powerful. Why? Because overthinking is rarely about too many thoughts. It is about unacknowledged feelings disguised as endless analysis. Imagine your mind as a river. When the current flows freely, it is calm, reflective, life-giving. But when logs and stones block its path, the water churns, collides, swirls in confusion. Overthinking is that swirl. The shadow is the hidden debris beneath the surface. Think about it. How often do you rehearse conversations in your head? Not because you enjoy it, but because you fear judgment. How often do you plan for the worst-case scenario, not because it's likely, but because deep inside you carry unresolved anxiety? The shadow feeds on avoidance, avoiding conflict, avoiding failure, avoiding discomfort. And in that avoidance, your mind works overtime to fill in the silence. Shadow work matters today more than ever because we live in an age of overstimulation. Notifications, comparisons, societal pressures, they all amplify the voice of the inner critic. But the critic is not born out of thin air. It is built from years of conditioning, childhood messages of not enough, societal expectations of be perfect, and unspoken fears of rejection. Over time, these voices take root in the unconscious, where they become the shadow's mask. And here's the paradox. Overthinkers often pride themselves on being rational, careful, responsible. Yet beneath the surface, much of the analysis is driven not by clarity, but by fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of being seen as inadequate, fear of failure. The shadow thrives in those fears, whispering through the critic, "Be careful, don't risk it, you're not ready." Shadow work is the antidote not by eliminating thoughts, but by transforming the relationship you have with them. Instead of battling your mind, you begin to dialogue with it. You trace the roots of your worries. You uncover the emotions that hide beneath your logic. And in doing so, you start reclaiming the energy that the shadow has held hostage. This is why shadow work is not just for the spiritually curious, it is a survival tool for the modern overthinker. Without it, the cycle of mental noise continues endlessly. With it, you discover the difference between your authentic voice and the critic's echo. And once you see that difference, the possibility of peace becomes real. So as we move deeper into this journey, remember, the goal is not to destroy the inner critic, but to meet it, to bring light into the places where it has been hiding. Because when the shadow is seen, it loses its grip. And when it loses its grip, you begin to breathe freely again. Let me tell you a story. There was once a traveler who wandered into a forest at dusk. He wanted a shortcut home, but the deeper he walked, the more tangled the path became. Trees leaned in like watchful figures. Shadows stretched across the ground, twisting into shapes his eyes could not quite understand. Every rustle of leaves made him think of danger. Every turn seemed to lead him further into confusion. He told himself, "It's just my imagination. I need to stay logical." Yet the more he reasoned, the darker the forest grew. His heartbeat raced, his thoughts spun. What if I can't find my way? What if something is waiting in the dark? And then he heard it. A voice, not from outside, but from within. "You should have known better. You always make things harder. You never get it right." The traveler stopped. For the first time, he realized the forest wasn't his real enemy. It was his own critic, echoing louder than the rustling branches. The shadow had taken the shape of the woods around him. The more he denied his fear, the more the path twisted. This story is your story, if you are an overthinker. The forest is your mind, crowded with endless possibilities, scenarios, and imagined dangers. The shadows among the trees are the repressed fears you refuse to name. And that harsh inner voice, that is your critic, born from the shadow disguising itself as logic, but in truth, carrying the weight of old wounds. Here lies the paradox. If the traveler keeps running, the forest will only thicken. If he fights the darkness, the shadows will grow taller. But if he pauses, breathes, and listens, something shifts. He begins to notice that the path is not random. It is guiding him toward the very center, where the forest clears. In Jungian terms, this is what shadow work is. Instead of fleeing your overthinking mind, you enter it. You stop resisting the critic and start asking, "What are you trying to tell me? What part of myself have I abandoned?" When the traveler dares to sit down in the clearing, he sees that the shadows are not monsters, but forgotten parts of himself, his fear of failure, his longing for approval, his shame of imperfection. One by one, they step forward. One by one, he acknowledges them. And with each acknowledgement, the forest grows lighter, until he realizes the path home was never outside him. It was waiting in the stillness of his own acceptance. And so it is with you. Overthinking is not the curse you believe it to be. It is the forest, yes, but it is also the invitation. The critic is not here to destroy you. It is here to remind you that something inside longs to be seen. The question is, will you keep running through the woods of your mind? Or will you pause, face the shadows, and finally walk yourself home? Overthinking is not a harmless habit. It is often the shadow wearing a mask. Let us explore 3 of the clearest signs that the shadow is shaping the mind of an overthinker. 1. Endless self-criticism, disguised as preparation. Have you noticed how your inner critic always pretends to protect you? It whispers, "Think harder, prepare more, don't miss a single detail." On the surface, it looks like caution, but underneath lives the shadow carrying the fear of being seen as inadequate. Overthinkers prepare not out of joy, but out of dread. They replay conversations, create countless scenarios, and chase perfection as if the right amount of thought will finally make them safe. Yet no amount of mental rehearsal can protect from life's uncertainties. The critic keeps you busy, because if you are always occupied with thinking, you never have to feel the sting of unworthiness. But what if all this preparation is not protection, but prison? What if the inner critic is not a guardian, but a shadow demanding your attention? 2. Analysis that hides avoidance. There is another way the shadow reveals itself, through endless analysis. Instead of allowing yourself to feel sadness, anger, or disappointment, you turn the situation into a puzzle. You dissect every detail, searching for reasons and hidden meanings, as if solving the problem will erase the pain. Why this compulsion? Because long ago you learned that certain emotions were unacceptable. Perhaps you were told not to cry, not to be angry, not to show weakness. Those feelings were buried deep into the unconscious. Now, when they rise, the shadow throws a storm of thoughts to drown them out. So you analyze, and analyze, and analyze. But the more you think, the further you drift from the truth of what you actually feel. The head spins, because the heart has been silenced. And here lies the paradox. The harder you search for clarity, the more tangled the web becomes, because clarity was never missing in the mind. It was buried in the heart. 3. Fear of decisions. Overthinkers often feel paralyzed at crossroads. They crave certainty, yet every option feels dangerous. The shadow is feeding this paralysis. Deep down rests a belief: if I choose wrong, I will lose love. If I fail, I will be rejected. These are not logical fears. They are old scars carried from the past. The shadow whispers through hesitation: stay still, don't risk it. Safety is in waiting. And so you delay, circle, and second guess. You tell yourself you're being careful, but in truth, the shadow is protecting the part of you terrified of being unloved if you make a mistake. But here's the irony. The very act of avoiding decisions is itself a decision, the decision to stay trapped. What you fear most is not the wrong choice, but the pain of rejection that the shadow still holds. These 3 signs, self-criticism, analysis as avoidance, and decision paralysis, are not random quirks. They are messages from the shadow, coded in the language of thought. They are not here to torment you, but to show you where you are still hiding from yourself. And if you dare to look closer, you will see that the critic is not your enemy. The endless thoughts are not a curse, and hesitation is not weakness. They are all signals, lanterns in the dark forest, guiding you to the parts of yourself that have been waiting quietly to be acknowledged. We have seen how the shadow hides behind criticism, analysis, and indecision. But its reach goes further. Here are 3 more ways the shadow reveals itself in the life of an overthinker. 1. Obsession with what others think. Overthinkers often spend hours replaying interactions, examining every word, every gesture, every silence. The question beneath it all is simple: did they like me? Did I say the wrong thing? On the surface, it seems like social awareness, but at its root lies the shadow's wound, the fear of rejection. The shadow carries the memory of times you felt unseen, unheard, or unloved. And now, the critic disguises itself as caution, forcing you to scan the approval of others like a radar. But the more you seek validation outside, the further you drift from the voice within. And here's the painful irony. The more you worry about being accepted, the less authentic you become, and the very acceptance you crave slips further away. 2. Perfectionism that masks shame. For many overthinkers, perfectionism feels like strength. You demand excellence, polish every detail, strive for flawlessness. Yet beneath perfectionism hides the shadow's secret, shame. Somewhere inside, a voice insists: if I am flawless, I will finally be worthy. If I never make mistakes, no one can reject me. But this bargain is impossible. Human life is messy, mistakes are inevitable, and perfection becomes a cage where every slip feels like a disaster. The shadow feeds this cycle because as long as you are chasing perfection, you never pause to ask, who taught me that my natural self was not enough? And here is the paradox. The more you try to erase flaws, the more you erase your humanity, the very thing that makes you lovable. 3. Mental exhaustion that hides emotional hunger. There is a reason overthinkers are often exhausted. The mind works overtime, spinning, calculating, rehearsing. But exhaustion is not the real problem, it is the symptom. The deeper reality is that the shadow is starving. When emotions are ignored, they don't vanish, they demand energy to keep buried. Each unacknowledged feeling consumes mental fuel. That is why you can spend hours thinking, yet feel drained, as if you ran a marathon sitting still. What you call mental exhaustion is often emotional hunger. The shadow is knocking, asking to be felt. And the more you resist, the louder it knocks. The paradox is clear. The harder you try to think your way out, the more energy you lose. Peace does not come from solving every thought, but from finally allowing the feelings underneath to be seen. These 3 signs, preoccupation with others' opinions, perfectionism, and mental exhaustion, are all messages of the shadow. They are not random weaknesses. They are survival strategies that once kept you safe, but now keep you trapped. And here is the turning point. Once you see these patterns as signals instead of flaws, you begin to reclaim your power. The critic that once haunted you becomes a teacher. The exhaustion that once drained you becomes a compass. And the hunger that once felt unbearable becomes the invitation to wholeness. We have traced the many disguises of the shadow in the overthinking mind. But awareness alone is not enough. The question is, how do we begin to integrate the shadow so that the critic becomes an ally and the restless mind learns to rest? Let us uncover the final lessons. 1. Meeting the inner critic with curiosity. Most overthinkers try to silence the critic, pushing it away or drowning it in distraction. Yet the harder you resist, the louder it becomes. Integration begins with a shift in posture. Instead of fighting, you listen. When the critic says, "You're not ready," what if you ask, "What are you protecting me from?" When it scolds, "You always fail," what if you respond, "Whose voice are you echoing?" This dialogue transforms the critic from an enemy into a messenger. Often, you will discover that its harsh tone hides a scared child, an old memory, or a forgotten dream. The paradox is simple. The critic loses its claws the moment you choose curiosity over fear. 2. Allowing the body to speak. Overthinking traps you in your head, but the shadow often lives in the body. Tight shoulders, shallow breath, a restless heart. These are messages too. Instead of trying to solve your anxiety with thought, pause and feel. Place a hand on your chest. Notice where the tension hides. The body remembers what the mind denies. By breathing into those knots, by naming the sensations without judgment, you invite the shadow to surface in safe ways. What once felt like chaos begins to soften because you are no longer abandoning your own signals. Here lies a hidden truth. You cannot think your way into peace, but you can feel your way into wholeness. 3. Practicing small acts of authenticity. The deepest hunger of the shadow is to be seen, and one of the most powerful ways to integrate it is through small acts of authenticity. Say the word you usually swallow. Show the feeling you usually hide. Choose the option that feels true, even if it is imperfect. Each act is a message to the unconscious. You are allowed. You belong. You are enough. Slowly, the shadow loosens its grip because it no longer needs to shout to be noticed. The paradox reveals itself again. The less you chase perfection, the more whole you feel. The less you seek approval, the more love you invite. These lessons, curiosity toward the critic, listening to the body, and practicing authenticity are not one-time solutions. They are practices, lived day by day. And through them, integration happens not in a single breakthrough, but in the quiet unfolding of daily life. For the overthinker, this is the turning point, realizing that peace is not found in thinking harder, but in relating differently. The critic is not destroyed, but understood. The shadow is not rejected, but embraced. And in that embrace, the storm of thought finally begins to calm. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For the overthinker, this sentence strikes like a mirror. Enlightenment is not about forcing positivity or coating the mind with affirmations. It is about daring to meet the very darkness that fuels the restless storm of thought. The shadow is not evil. It is not your enemy. It is the sum of all you have pushed away. Your hidden anger, your silent sadness, your unspoken desires, your unmet needs. And every time you reject these parts, the shadow grows more powerful. It is like a child knocking on the door, louder and louder, until you finally turn to listen. Overthinking is one of the most common ways this knocking shows up. The critic inside you is not here to destroy you. It is here to remind you that something within is unacknowledged. The exhaustion you feel is not proof of weakness. It is proof of energy wasted on suppression. The hesitation at every crossroad is not cowardice. It is the body remembering past rejection. But here is the paradox that Jung understood. When you turn toward the shadow, its grip weakens. What was once a monster in the dark becomes a guide in the light. The critic that once tormented you transforms into a teacher of boundaries, discernment, and self-respect. The anxiety that once drained you becomes a signal pointing you back to forgotten feelings. Philosophy reminds us that all growth begins with tension. Light does not erase darkness, it reveals it. Harmony is not the absence of struggle, it is the dance between opposites. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole, not by rejecting parts of yourself, but by bringing them into dialogue. So, what does this mean for the overthinker? It means your restless mind is not a defect, but an invitation. Each loop of thought is a symbol. Each doubt is a messenger. Each hesitation is a doorway. The more you resist them, the more they torment you. But the more you face them, the more they transform. Imagine this. The very critic you despise becomes the ally that warned you when you were betraying your own values. The hesitation you curse becomes the reminder to act with integrity rather than impulse. The exhaustion you fear becomes the call to feel, to rest, to be human again. Jung believed that only by facing the unconscious could we step into true freedom. And freedom for the overthinker does not mean never having thoughts. It means being able to think without being enslaved by thought. It means hearing the critic without obeying it. It means choosing action not from fear, but from alignment. Perhaps this is the deepest secret of shadow work, that the mind you long to silence is not broken. It is brilliant, but burdened. Once you learn to honor the shadow, your thoughts stop spiraling against you and begin working for you. The critic no longer chains you, it guides you. The shadow no longer sabotages you, it completes you. And maybe this is why Jung insisted that the journey toward wholeness always begins with the shadow. Because until we meet what we fear in ourselves, we will keep running from it in the world. We have walked through the forest of the overthinking mind. We have listened to the critic, uncovered its masks, and faced the shadow that hides beneath its voice. And now, we arrive at the most important truth. Peace does not come by silencing the mind, it comes by integrating what the mind is trying so desperately to avoid. Shadow work is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. It is not about destroying your critic. It is about seeing that the critic was always a part of you longing to be accepted. It is not about erasing your overthinking, but about transforming it so that thought no longer spins against you, but flows in harmony with you. The journey is not quick. It is not linear. Some days you will fall back into old spirals. Some days the critic will scream louder than ever. But if you remember this truth, that every spiral is a signal, every criticism a message, every hesitation a doorway, then you are no longer trapped. You are in dialogue. You are awake from darkness to awareness, from awareness to integration, from integration to wholeness. This is the path Jung pointed to. And for the overthinker, it is a path home, out of endless loops of fear, into the grounded freedom of authenticity. So as we close, ask yourself, what if the very thoughts that torment you are not enemies but invitations? What if the restless mind you fight against has been trying all along to lead you back to yourself? If these questions stir something in you, then you are already on the journey, and I invite you to walk it with us. Share your reflections in the comments. What does your inner critic say most often? How do you feel it connects to your shadow? And if you found resonance in this exploration, consider subscribing to this channel. Here, we dive deep into shadow work, Carl Jung's wisdom, and the hidden forces that shape our lives. Together, we uncover the treasures buried in the dark and bring them into the light. Your shadow is not here to destroy you. It is here to complete you. And when you finally embrace it, you will discover that peace was never about stopping your thoughts. It was about listening to the voice beneath them.